There's lots of times when you're animating when you'll want to be able to track an object. And so to track an object is real easy. All we do is come down to our camera menu here and press follow selected. And this will make the camera, which you can see it automatically turn the visibility of it back on when we chose that option. This will cause the camera to follow whatever we have selected at the time. So you can see both down here in our camera view, we can see the view changing as we move this cube around. And also we can see the actual camera moving and jutting about as it follows this cube, which is pretty sweet. At any time we want the camera to stop tracking something, we just come down here to the same menu and select stop following. And now the camera will no longer follow. So if I press G to grab this cube, notice that it's no longer moving. We can also switch which object we are following on the fly. So if I were to double right click over here and say add a cylinder shape or something, I could under camera, click follow selected, and this will follow that cylinder. So as you can see, as I move that around, it follows. If I all of a sudden changed my mind and wanted it to be the cube, I could just click on the cube, come down here and click follow selected. And I don't even have to press stop following first to be able to do that. It will just switch straight for me. This is sweet to be able to follow things, but it's especially cool when we animate them. There's two different ways we can insert keyframes for objects. If we press I, we'll see a keyframe created for a cube down here. And so we could right click the timeline indicator here, which is what this little orange sliver thing is called. Move this down a second or so, press G to grab this cube, press I to insert another keyframe, and that will insert a keyframe for us. And notice as we do that, the camera follows the object. The other way we can insert keyframes, basically the same thing, only it will automatically move the timeline indicator down a second each time for us. And this allows us to add a very quick base animation, one which we can immediately start seeing some results, and then we can tweak the time distances between keyframes. If I were to press X to delete all those keyframes down here in the dope sheet, and this time instead of pressing I, press F, notice this inserts a keyframe for us and moves the timeline indicator down a second. So then I could press G to grab and move the cube here, press F again, press G to grab, move it over here, maybe press R also to rotate it, Z to constrain that, maybe S to scale, press F, and insert another keyframe there. So now I've made this little animation of this cube moving about, and I have my camera tracking the cube as well, which is very useful. I'm going to go ahead and click my expand library button here, and under my examples folder, I have this camera tracking little example file here. I'm going to click this and drag it out in the 3D view to open this, and press this to close my library back up. And so here you can see I've animated a bunch of basic shapes here, a torus, some Suzanne heads and whatnot. If we press play, we can see this kind of little circus of shapes and things moving around. Press stop. So down here in our camera area, which in Sensei format, this camera area combined with this custom menu here, we kind of call this our director's chair. And this just sort of brings together a lot of scattered elements all across Blender into one centralized area and menus to give us a lot of control synonymous with that of the director of a film. Along with these various menus for camera control, lighting of our scene and stuff like that, we also have some quick buttons to allow us to test our animation and rewind it back to the beginning. So there's a couple of differences about the way things are displayed in our camera down here as opposed to in our regular 3D view. So one of the first things you'll notice is that we can see this kind of white background, and that just happens to be because if I click on my World tab in my Properties panel here, this is displaying what our background looks like when we go to render, whereas in the default 3D view, this is just the kind of generic user interface background. We also don't see things like which items are highlighted, the grid, and stuff like that. Basically things that are just there to help out in the user interface. The point of this area is to get us as close to a representation of what the final render will be like as possible without eating up too many resources. So if we press play here, we can see the animation going on. And we could track any one of these objects if we wanted to. So I could click on the cube, under camera, click follow selected, and when we press play, we can see the camera tracking the cube all throughout here. We could easily switch that to say that torus. We just click on the torus and press follow selected, and then press rewind and press play. And now the camera follows the torus wherever it goes. And so what I'm going to do right now, so I don't have to keep rewinding this, is turn on my animation preview button here. And this button is located between the start and the end frame. So we'll click that. And when we click that, you'll see that the outside of the dope sheet area gets kind of like this black color. So what we can do is bring these end frames down right to where the last frame is. And so when we have this on and we press play, this limits the area of the animation. Let's track some different things. So I could say, click one of these big Suzanne heads here and press follow that. And now we're tracking that. Or I could say, click one of these little Suzanne heads here and press follow selected. And now we're tracking that little one and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and press stop here and click this to turn that off. So I'm going to go ahead and click back on this torus shape here, and under camera, press follow selected to follow that. And so if I click this camera menu, and actually once you click open these menus, you can actually click and drag the menu up the top here if you want to move it over. You may have noticed that as soon as we start following something, we get a new option called constraint. And the constraint value is referring to how tightly should this camera be following this object. Right now, if I try to rotate my camera, I can move it around anywhere. However, if I try to pan by holding shift and middle mouse to pan the camera away, I can't really do that because this tracking constraint is causing it to very rigidly focus on this. So we can decrease the amount that that's done so we can have a little more wiggle room if we want to pan the camera or something. Under here, if we lower this constraint to say 0.28 or something like that, now if we hold shift and press middle mouse, we can move a little bit. We have a little bit of wiggle room still while mostly constraining the torus shape here. And so this is ideal for when you actually want to animate the camera itself in addition to whatever things you have animated in your scene.